Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Open Up the Workforce, where we speak with leaders driving the future of diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace. I'm excited to be joined today by Caroline Casey, the founder of the Valuable 500, the world's largest CEO collective and business movement for disability inclusion, representing over 22 million employees in 41 countries around the world. Caroline has a powerful story that I've personally been very deeply moved by and inspired by her work. Caroline, thank you for being with us today. Can you share a little bit more about your story and what led you to founding the Valuable 500?
First of all, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm a troublemaker, so I think, or a positive disruptor, or whatever way you want to call it, but I'm at my heart a hustler, and I'm an inclusion hustler. I'm the child of an entrepreneur, so doing stuff or finding solutions where problems exist is kind of in the blood. And so why the Valuable 500 was formed was two reasons. Personal reason, I myself have a lived experience of disability. I have ocular albinism and I'm registered blind, which I hid for a long time. And I came out of the disability closet when I was 28 years old as a management consultant in Accenture. So I feel very passionately that I want a world where nobody has to cover who they are. Because when we cover who we are, we're never our best selves, you know. So that's the personal reason. And the professional reason is I was just fed up with a lack of accelerated change to end this global pandemic of disability exclusion, which affects 20% of our population who have a lived experience of it. But with a mother and a father, that's 54% of our global population. And I believe the only way to end disability exclusion is to be working with one of the most powerful forces on the planet. And that is business. And so what business includes, society includes what business values, society values. And the only way to make business inclusive is certainly with the intention, accountability of the CEOs.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for doing that. This is actually the first time we've had a founder on the show. And
really?
As a founder to founder, yes, this is so exciting to hear the impact in the story, especially because, you know, it's a lived experience, right? It means something so much. That's the fuel that keeps you going to make such an impact and change. And you mentioned, you know, over 20% of the workplace and the population. And you also mentioned moms and dads. And I just love that picture. As I was setting this, I saw, you know, well over 1 billion, but that's just so much more than what I was thinking. Yes. Yeah. Can you paint a picture of just what is the landscape today?
Well, first of all, thank you for asking that question. So I encourage everybody who listens, who does not have a connection around disability, be radically curious. Will you be curious, right? We're not defined by our disability. It is part of who we are. And the work that we need to do in business is to, you know, the biggest barrier for people with disabilities in business is the 6 inches between everybody else's ears about what disability is. So let me just kind of break it down to explain. We work to the UN definition of disability, which is, it means it's physical, which is a mobility. It can be sensory, which is sight and hearing and taste and speech, cognitive or learning disabilities. So like things like dyspraxia, dyslexia. We also have mental health issues and significant mental health, acquired conditions like the MSs, the ALSs. And also you've got to remember everything around autism and ADHD. And so this is it's a big group, right? But the thing is, every single person on this planet, if you're lucky enough to live to an age, will be disabled at some point, right? Every single person. And we forget that 80% of disability is acquired between the ages of 18 and 64, means that disability does not discriminate. You can choose anybody in any category, in any place. And 80% of disability is invisible. So that's that picture. And people forget about it. And so when you say, they go, no, not really. There's no way it's nearly 20%. Yeah, it is. And then when you add 2 people that love that one person, you're at 54%. You know, it's incredible.
That's so powerful. I'm learning a lot right now. And when I initially was, you know, thinking of this conversation and I think about disability inclusion, given the work I'm in, I thought of the workplace immediately, but disability inclusion is so much bigger, right? It's How do we design products? How do we service to make sure what we're building is accessible, not just our own workplace? When you think about the aspects of disability inclusion that you're focused on, can you paint a bigger picture around that too?
Well, first of all, when I think about your organization and Symba, and let's do this through the disability lens, and we think about what you do. Are you ensuring that when you're looking at internships or bringing people into organizations that you're making sure they're accessible should you have interns who disclose or do not of having a disability? So the whole thing around disability is the world is not designed inclusively. And that is because we haven't had the lived experience as part of the design process. So when you think about how, I don't know, let's just look at an airport, for example. For somebody like me, and I just did a big meeting with Grazia, it's a big media publication in the UK, and they were just saying to me, like, well, what's it like for you to be getting through the airport? Well, I can't see the signage, right? I can't see the signs. But that doesn't just affect me as a person who is registered blind. Affects other people who have to change their glasses on and off, or somebody who's rushing, right? So it is the basic principle of universal design. And that is designing our business systems and our societies and our products and services with the 8 billion people in mind. So if it's designed for you, I design for everyone. So people forget that disability was the innovation around SMS texting. That's designed for the deaf community, but everybody uses it. Do you know that the remote control was designed for blind people like me to watch television, which is sort of an oxymoron, I guess, and we all use remote controls. So you got to think about, are we considering all ways of humanity when we're designing? And it's the intention, Ahva, that gets in the way. I'm telling you right now, we pretty much have all the money to make sure that physical places and digital spaces are accessible. But it's the intentionality. That's what gets in the way.
There's such clear examples. And when you share, a shared lived experience, almost the one that you shared being in the airport, how do we get that to be involved in the design process? How do we ensure that people actually are asking the right questions when they are going through designing these experiences with their business practices?
Well, I guess there's nobody who understands you as a founder than another founder, right? Nobody. And so if we were designing like a training course for you or for founders, or because like you, I am a founder. And so we talk to the founders about what they want, right? So if you're going to do something about your personal development, I'll come to you and say, listen, what's missing? What are you having trouble with? What can we actually do? So the answer to designing inclusively or designing in inclusion and accessibility for people with disabilities is to talk to people with disabilities and help and make it easy for them to be part of the process at the beginning, not retrofitting or fixing something, because that is costly. It's a waste of time and it's plain stupid. And in this day and age, it's not like we don't see extraordinary activists and artists and business people and adventurers and leaders, all who have lived experience of disability, who are only too dying to come in to be part of processes, not just to make it inclusive for people with disabilities, but for everyone. Listen, inclusion is for everyone or not at all. You can't have a la carte inclusion. You can't say, well, I'll be inclusive of women, but I'm not going to do disability. Like, that's a delusion. You can't do that. So if we're going to design, to be inclusive, which is what we want to do, and Apple, come on, look at this, one of the most successful companies in the world. And Steve Jobs, whether you like him or not, what he wanted to do was to create and design beautiful products for everyone. And look what that did. It made that company super successful. We don't need to be making the business case for inclusion anymore. It's a risk if you don't get it right.
That is so powerful. I think that's a really powerful note that resonates so much with me. And I'd love to dig into a little bit more like, how are you addressing this at the Valuable 500?
I was in trouble. Didn't I tell you? I'm a fierce-hearted, rebel-hearted person.
I love that.
It doesn't take no for an answer. You know that.
Oh,
you know
yes.
you started a company because you weren't willing to take the status quo as it was. You saw something and went, no, I'm going to go after it. And I don't imagine that you listened to everybody else who told you no, or it's too difficult, it's impossible. So in a way, I was so frustrated having been a disability activist for so long, and I'd had some incredible wins and some dramatic failures, let me tell you. But every failure was I guess it was like somebody giving me an Etch-a-Sketch and trying it again. You learn every time. So the thing with the Valuable 500 is I believe in the power of collective action, really scaled collective action. I believe in the power of leadership and getting disabled talent into the C-suite of tomorrow. And I mostly believe in the power so unbelievably of reporting and measuring and being accountable. So to build a Valuable 500 in itself was an extraordinary feat. But with that amazing historic thing that we achieved against all the odds, I got to do something that matches the enormity of the opportunity. So what we're asking our companies to do is to do this thing I've called synchronized collective action. And that's getting our 500 companies with all the power of their employees and brands and supply chains to work on 3 system barriers. And a synchronized collective action is doing exactly the same thing in exactly the same way at exactly the same time with a deadline. And that is what we're asking our companies to do. I want to see young disabled talent get into be the CEOs of tomorrow. I want to see disability performance in annual reports. And I want to see authentic representation of people with disabilities in really good external and internal corporate communication. And these are 3 of the system barriers, because I want system change. I'm not interested in the system, the symptoms, not interested for looking good. This is the long haul. This is the long haul. So yeah, there are 3.
Thank you for sharing that, Caroline. I feel like for us at Symba, my whole vision was around good trouble. And that's the mission of late Congressman John Lewis. And that's really also what propelled me into this in so many ways. And I love hearing you say not only get talent in, but impacting the C-suite, impacting the managerial growth trajectory long term. That's so important. And I read your recent piece, What's Measured is Managed, and your report that came out. And I saw that only 22% of the Valuable 500 companies publicly disclose their workforce representation. How is that aligned with the work you're doing? And maybe how are you trying to change that?
Yeah, so 22% of the Valuable 500. Now, first of all, I want to be clear that the Valuable 500 chose these 3 areas. So this is what's brilliant. Like we have this massive, like we are, I guess, the greatest, biggest research organization in the world that represents business. I mean, some of the brands that we're working with, some of the CEOs I have access to. So they said, look, these are the 3 really hardest issues, leadership and reporting and representation and the interconnectedness of them. But by far, reporting, 22% of our companies do some form of reporting, but it's so unharmonized that it's of no materiality. Like, it's like, I don't know, they measure the difference between apples and dinosaurs. And so we can do nothing with that. So what we did is we went out to our Valuable 500 companies and said, okay, you said reporting is an issue. So what are the 5 metrics that you feel that you could report on in your annual reports? And, let's look at them all. Give me something easy, give me something medium, give me something hard. So these were the 5 they came up with. Do they have an E or a G or an employee resource group? And does that have, executive sponsorship? Do they have goals? Do they have goals with budgets? What training do they do? What is their digital accessibility? And lastly, do they know how many people with disabilities are in their company? And this is the greatest hot potato, because I said to you, 80% of disability is invisible. And most of us in most of our countries do not need to disclose that we have a disability. And so on basic research that we've done with companies like M&S and Channel 4 and Microsoft and Google and Deloitte, we've probably got underneath the bonnet of it, knowing that about 12 to 14% of every company's teams have lived experience of disability, but are not disclosing. Now, this is the greatest opportunity. Because imagine if we could have people feeling comfortable enough to disclose they have a disability anonymously, okay, in a culture that they feel that they can be trusted to hold that information. That just is a game changer. Imagine what we could do with that. Because all of this conversation about, people with disabilities and getting them into employment and all the big reasons that we don't have, what would it look like if we could uncover the truth that actually of the 22 million employees in the valuable 500 companies, anything between 12 to 14% have a direct experience.
That is a beautiful future workplace, a place where you really can show up. And, bringing back to what you said at the beginning, being able to, really perform your best, do your best when you are comfortable in your own skin and able to do so. I think it's so important. I am also just frankly amazed by the level of buy-in at scale that you've been able to achieve. As I've spoken with leaders on this show, we talk about getting buy-in internally at one org and how difficult that is. But you have managed to do this across 500 organizations, transcending, oceans and so many other factors. What is your secret?
Well, there's a few. The most important one, the secret of the success. First of all, let me tell you, we had to speak to nearly 2,500 organizations to get 500 to say yes. So before you say well done, I still see that they are the biggest brands in the world, and I get that. And to be part of the valuable 500, it was the CEO themselves that had to give their signature across their photograph against a board level commitment to scale the work they do. So that's a big deal. And how we got them to do it is a combination of the head and the heart. Never underestimate. And I'm looking at a founder, so I'm guessing I know what I'm talking about. Never underestimate the power of passionately telling the truth from your heart, you as a human being, and connecting with the people that you're trying to convince with clarity, simple, and with authenticity, and with a passion that can be contagious. That's real. That's the heart. And then the head side, for all the ones that maybe aren't so moved by the heart, be clear, we had the statistics. We had the spending power of disabilities, 13 trillion. I mean, what company in the world would put a barrier up? We had the data to prove that 7% of the C-suite of these companies already themselves had a lived experience of disability, but were disclosing it. We had the data to prove that we have an aging population. So aging population and disability together, this is a huge market space. And the only way to serve that market space is to have the talent in the business. So it was a combination of head and heart. And I really believe powerfully that you don't achieve things by shaming people alone. You can't do that. In a way, it's about telling stories and underlying them with data. And every time somebody says no, you don't take it personally. You go back in there and you just say, and again, and again. And remember, the CEOs of these companies are mothers and fathers or sisters and brothers or husbands and wives of people. They're human beings. And so never underestimate the power of both the head and the heart.
I'm so inspired by that. And everything, you're sharing, it really, I'm having throwbacks to moments in my own life. I mean, even my first internship, I was actually rejected from it, but I emailed them saying, I'd love to apply. What should I do next year to be considered? And they made a spot for me. And it was a remote internship over, 10 years ago. So that idea was kind of radical, but I do think that humanizing all of these elements and understanding the power of, as you say, head and heart. I've always heard art and science, and I love head and heart. I think that really captures it in such a powerful way. I love that they are signing a commitment, but what happens next after the CEO makes that public commitment? How do we continue to keep that buy-in and sustain it over time?
Yeah, well, so look, there's lots of things that the accountability for them to achieve their commitment. Most of our valuable 500 companies have gone way beyond the initial commitment. And so how that commitment was maintained is the employees kept their company to account, the media kept their company to account, there's ways. And let's be honest, they had to sign a signature. Like, that's honor bound. I still believe that I will do what I say I will do, right? So you honor this. And this is a partnership. This is not membership. The Valuable 500 isn't a members thing where they pay us a fee and I've got to do something for them and I got to serve them. No, they're part of a partnership that every one of us together work together to end disability exclusion. So if you don't do your piece, get out. And we've asked companies to leave. I've never named them and we will never shame them. We'll just say, hello, goodbye. And because we have a waiting list of I think it's 28 other companies. And we'll be announcing 2 or 3 more huge brands actually just before the end of this year. So that's the first piece. But the second piece is, how do you maintain it? You have got to say, well done every step of the way. Every little win is a brick to keep moving forward, but you've got to keep painting an ambition, a sense of excitement about what we're all working at together. And our version of that is Tokyo 2025. So these 3 things that I'm asking them to do synchronized collective actions towards, I've given them a deadline. There's nothing better than a deadline, right? Because everybody has FOMO, like fear of missing out. Nobody wants to be the 5th Beatle, and they kind of looking at each other and who's doing what. So it's amazing, kind of sense of competition, a sense of being in it together. And then there's deadline. Then on the 3rd of December, 2025, they all got to pony up their results in front of each other. It's amazing how motivating that can be.
Everything that you're describing is also the principles of leadership. And you are a true leader of all of these CEOs and this 500 group collectively. And you answered one of my questions, because as I was learning even more and more about the work you do, I said, well, what if there's more than 500? I want to be, we're a small company. I want to be a part of it. So how can people be involved in the movement, even if they're not part of the Valuable 500?
Well, listen, I'm guessing that you will be so the criteria to be the Valuable 500, one of them is you had to have 1,000 employees and up. Okay. And it was private sector, because actually that's where the greatest gap was. Small and medium companies are the ones doing really good stuff, actually. So I have a funny feeling that you'll scale fairly fast. So you will in time, of course, be there. Now, once we reached our 500, game on. Come on in. You can come and play, because we reached 500. We did the impossible. We created this unstoppable force of collective action. In a way, if you can think about it, I don't know, have you ever heard when an orchestra is tuning up, right? The way all the instruments are going and they're doing all the bits, and individually they sound great. But when they're tuning up, oh my Lord, the noise in the head. And then when the conductor comes in and it brings them together, my God, that's magic. It's just beautiful. That's the stuff that moves the world, right? So the Valuable 500's gift is that we work in symphony. Sorry with the orchestra metaphor, but anyway, we work in symphony with each other so we can bring all the instruments in. Now that we've got the main orchestra of the 500, great. After Tokyo 2025, come on in. And for any of you who want to come on in, of course there's room. We broke our target. And so now 500 is the name, but it could be 5 million. Of course it can.
I love that, especially as a cellist myself who's been playing since a young kid. I really appreciate all those references that you make. And hopefully the next place is in a beautiful place, because I've always wanted to go to Tokyo.
Well, yes. And hopefully you'll be by then there. But one of the things I really want to see in Tokyo, right? I have this kind of vision in my head of what is it going to look like? 500 stories multiplied by 3, because they're the 3 challenges, and the data that's going to come out of that. Can you imagine what we can do with that? The gaps that we're going to see that will be able to direct us to the future action we need to do. That's why this is so important. Rather than doing these individual heroic pieces of action, it's now time to join it all up together so that we can do something meaningful with it and stop making excuses for change being so slow.
That's going to be so amazing and powerful. I would love to also ask you about trends that you're seeing before we wrap up into our next final question around technology and how you think that technology is impacting disability inclusion today.
Technology is the greatest scaler and amplifier of change. And we've got a deadline. And what technology does makes the word no be an imposter. We can do this. And data is what keeps the data that we can collect because of technology now is it's outrageously fantastic. So we can collect the data, but most importantly, we can communicate. You've got to remember, we've got 500 companies. I can't go around to every company. So, COVID proved that I could get to people fast, right? Which is also good for the environment. I'm not getting on planes. So that has been able to help. But most importantly, technology, if designed inclusively, could be the greatest equalizer of all time, only if you have people with disabilities in the process of design. Because most things that we can do, and I have always wanted to race motorbikes, always, motorbikes and cars. It's been my forever dream. And when I think about, the driverless car, if we can get around the insurance companies, I will be driving through a desert listening to Led Zeppelin, my dream, hopefully on a motorbike. So that's where technology can be one of the greatest solutions, but only if you have the disability community as part of the design process.
Thank you for sharing that. As a tech founder, I appreciate your passion and openness to innovation and how important it is in this whole process. At Symba, our vision is to open up the workforce. And to us, that means creating a future of work that is accessible and creates equal access to wealth creation as well. What do you believe are the next steps we need to take in order to truly open up the workforce?
Well, you as an organization, so first of all, I love what you do, because actually one of the things that has been very successful in increasing the levels of disability participation in business is internships that are inclusive and mindful of this community. So I just asked Symba, opening it up is getting that talent and making sure that this is inclusive and you're inclusive in that. But what I would say, you are the greatest chance we have. You, the generation that is here, the entrepreneurs that are here, even people younger than you, use your voices, use your social media, ask the questions, be curious. Don't go to blame, but go to find, poke around, say why not. You have this chance that I don't think the generations before you had. I stand here because of all the great activists before me, but you can scale change with the tools and the environment and the context that you have. I honestly think in a year that has taken some of us decades to do. And I believe in the heart of the generations coming, because I believe that you truly believe that no human being is more important than another. And I think you do not have an a la carte version of inclusion. You truly believe that it means all for everyone. And you have technology now that could make that a reality. So it's you guys.
Wow, I'm so moved. I'm almost emotional.
Well, I've done a few cries today. I've had a really bad day. So I really am trying not to cry because I'm going to have a gin and tonic later. So I'm just like, but it is you guys. It is you guys, and I think about all the things that I was so lonely when I was in my 20s, so frightened to tell anybody I couldn't see because I couldn't see another me. There wasn't another me. And now look, Disability Pride in July, and look at the Vogue covers of Vogue magazine, and look at Selma Blair rocking her shit down, the red carpet. Look at Ellie Gouldstein and Gucci. Look at what's happening and look what you're insisting upon with your big hearts. Yeah, you're great. It's
beautiful.
Possible.
It's powerful. I really appreciate all these insights. I appreciate the work that you're doing on such a global scale, and want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing. You're leading the way, and I think that this is a call to action for the next generation to also feel empowered, to really stand up and continue being radically curious and leading the way forward. Caroline, is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I want to end on a quote that I just feel, and because your heart is up there, there's a beautiful quote by Maya Angelou that I live by. And it is, there's no greater agony than an untold story inside yourself. So as a founder, and as everyone goes into internships in companies, my request to all of us is live your truth, live your life the way you want to live your life. It is not for you to fit into anybody else's idea of who you are. You need to let your heart roar, because pretending to be somebody else like I did for fear of being judged and for fear of being stopped is a whole load of talent being wasted. It's a whole load of talent. So the work I do is not just about disability, but it is an invitation. And actually more than that, it's a yell with my arms wide open, is go live your life the way that you choose to live your life. And every time you get knocked down, pick yourself back up again, dust yourself off, and keep going forward.
Wow. Thank you, Caroline. It was such an honor to have you on Open Up the Workforce to share your story, your impact. And I cannot wait to see what happens at Tokyo 2025. It's going to be brilliant and beyond.
There.
Hopefully.
You might be there.
Hopefully. I would love
with your cello, maybe.
I should start practicing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to meet you. And I'm going to be sure to be seeing a lot more about Symba in the future. So congratulations on everything you've done.
Wonderful. Thank you, Caroline.